Katsuhiro Otomo is a man who needs no introduction, but I kinda want to give him one anyway. Otomo was just a little boy living in the middle of nowhere Japan with nothing to do to pass the time except read manga and draw doodles. And after high school, he decided to turn that into a career. He mostly stuck to short stories until his publisher, pleased with his work, begged him to make a full series. So Otomo got to work and planned out a little manga called Akira. And what was supposed to be a relatively unremarkable 10-chapter story shocked Otomo more than the world and bloomed into a 2,000-page series that ran for 8 years, and even got turned into an anime film which Otomo himself would direct. He had already been in the anime industry prior, but just as a character designer on a handful of projects. However, he wasn't satisfied with the designing, he wanted to do the directing too. So he made a live-action short film all by himself, and then learned how to animate to make a couple of animated short films, and then finally in 1988, he released his most influential and critically acclaimed film, Akira. A true landmark in Japanese animation, quite possibly the most iconic anime film ever made. Maybe even the greatest anime film period, though this is hotly contested. People all around the world were enthralled by this movie, and it got them wondering what kind of horrifically striking, visually stimulating, thematically poignant masterpiece would this Otomo guy make next? Nobody knew what to expect, which is why nobody expected this. What happened here? Well, first I should probably clarify what we're talking about. And also that this video is sponsored by Sakurako and Tokyo Treat. Tokyo Treat is a fun and exclusive Japanese snack box containing all different types of unique full-size snacks. And the best part is that it all gets shipped straight to your door. I haven't left my house in months now. I don't even know the date anymore. I just guess which month it is based on whichever box shows up because these boxes follow a monthly theme. They're telling me that this is the box for February and the theme is Sweet Valentine's. Valentine's Day is coming up, and if you really want it to be a sweet Valentine's Day, then you should probably direct your attention to the pamphlet that comes with this box, because aside from explaining the particulars of these tasty treats, there are some pointers on how to properly romance your one and only in Japan, which is still valuable to know, even if you don't live there, because they may be calling on patriots like you soon enough. Alright, enough about love, let's get to the food. We got sweet strawberry mochi, super red bean bread, soy sauce senbei, setsuban peanuts, a wasabi and seaweed savory snack, and another thing that's seaweed, the Koi Kea Farm salt and seaweed chips. And as for the things I love the most, top of the list as always is the Kit Kats, made exclusively for the great Yamato people. This one is a blend of milk chocolate and white chocolate, very good, as was the white chocolate strawberry latte. Now it said to use water in the booklet, but water was rejected at the ballot box, so I used milk and it hit the spot. Now I'm sorry to say I will not be showing you everything that comes in the box because, look, I don't know you like that. But you could always get a box for yourself or for a special someone and sate your curiosity and appetite for Japanese food items. You can sign up for a subscription for one of these boxes and get $5 off your first box by clicking the link in the description below and using my code. This does help the channel out, and now back to the video. Steamboy is the second major anime film directed by Katsuhiro Otomo, and it follows Ray Steam, the son of a scientist who himself is the son of a scientist, who created the steam ball. It's a device that can turn steam into a near-infinite source of power. Grandpa Steam and Father Steam got wrapped up in an experiment gone wrong in Alaska and went missing for a few years, but Ray never stopped believing that they would one day come back, nor did he ever stop believing in their work. And his faith in his family pays off when his grandfather sends him a package containing a steam ball and instructions to get the hell out of hell. I mean, Manchester. It turns out people from the O'Hara Foundation, the ones who sponsored all the research, want their marvel of scientific progress back, and let's just say that their intentions regarding the use of the steam ball are less than noble. So for the rest of the film, Ray tries to keep the ball out of the hands of the bad men, while he also tries to figure out just who the good men are. Central to the theme of Steamboy is the question of what is the purpose of science? Is it meant to reveal universal principles, to bring us closer to equality and make people happy? Or is it just a gateway to power, some unstoppable march towards a beautiful destruction? These are the two perspectives held by Grandpa Steam and Father Steam, respectively. I should probably start using their real names. Lloyd Steam is an idealistic old man with a fairy tale view of the world, at least according to his son, Edward Steam, the walking tin man. Most of the plot revolves around Ray struggling to come to terms with the purpose of science. He starts the story believing in his grandfather's ideals, but slowly falls into doubt after reuniting with his disfigured father and hearing his disfigured perspective. But the final nail in the coffin is when he encounters another scientist, the rival of the Dr. Steam, Robert Stevenson, who initially appears to agree with Dr. Lloyd's perspective, only to reveal he's actually a bit more like Edward. His view is that science primarily exists to make people happy, but the basis of that happiness is the nation, and it must be protected, and the only way to do that is to wage war. Based on this description, you might think that Steamboy is a very thought-provoking film that forces you to question your preconceived notions about good, evil, and the purpose of science, but actually the movie is more of an action-adventure with lots of explosions and just a tiny bit of heavy-handed preaching. If you want to find out if you have the strength to be an alcoholic, then take a shot every time someone says science.
Science. Science. Science. Science. Science. Science. Science.
This is no time for your annoying philosophies.
Over the course of the film, Ray is forced to confront various perspectives on science and sort out his own. And he does end up learning something by the end after spending time with each person, hearing what they have to say, and seeing what they truly are. But I can't say that I was totally satisfied with how this was handled. Now, I don't want to rail on the messaging too hard, but there are times when the film goes out of its way to bring up another one-sided discussion about science and war and the evils of money. And this wouldn't be so much of an issue if it didn't really want you to agree with Dr. Lloyd's idealistic view of things, because it ends up watering down the opposition into guy who likes power, guy who likes money, guy who likes war, and guy who likes prestige. These aren't bad motivations on their own, and there's nothing wrong with keeping things simple since this is just a single movie, but it's like the film forgets some of the more interesting aspects of its characters. You got two different mad scientists, one who's gone mad with power and another who's gone mad with idealism, and then another scientist who isn't mad at all but potentially morally dubious. Each was concerned with the consequences of science, but each had his own perspective. Lloyd ignored the consequences of science, usually to the detriment of the people standing next to him, and preached endlessly about a flowery view of science that sounds great on a pamphlet but never gets realized in the real world because it's just not realistic. Stevenson, on the other hand, accepted the consequences of science and preached a pragmatic approach, but he still dedicated his life to making other people's lives better, at the expense of the enemy, who you just have to trust your government to sort out correctly. And then you had Edward, who didn't just accept the consequences of science, he celebrated them. He wasn't interested in making people happy, he was only interested in accomplishing the impossible, which is exactly what he does when he perfects his father's research and creates the O'Hara's Flying Steam Castle, a flying fortress that is probably the main reason this movie took 10 years to make because of all the thought and detail that went into making this thing feel real. You can tell Otomo really cared about this set piece, but I'm not so sure that he cared that much about his characters. Take Scarlett O'Hara St. John's, the 14-year-old granddaughter of the chairman of the O'Hara Foundation, and one big reference to Gone with the Wind. Some people have called her annoying.
Mind your tone, you're talking to a lady.
But to be honest with you, she never really bothered me. She actually delivers one of my favorite lines when she cluelessly stumbles onto a big battle that's happening on her doorstep, and the Foundation representative who's trying to sell weapons to foreign dignitaries tells her,
It's just a little war with Great Britain.
and after taking stock of the situation, she's just like,
Simon,
Yes, Miss Scarlett, what is it?
make sure we win.
I like that moment. A lot, actually. But unfortunately, the movie doesn't really do anything with her. She wanders around with a motivation that changes from scene to scene, while the movie attempts a romance subplot, I think. But her relationship with Ray is tenuous at best. She sorta has an arc where she stops being so spoiled and bratty and learns about the real world and real problems, but it's not handled all that well. The film chooses to introduce her with her abusing her dog, and then like 5 minutes later, she's glued to Ray up until things get hectic. From then on, she just starts teleporting to wherever something interesting is happening. I think there should have been more time dedicated to her and Ray because they kind of personify the relationship between science and money, the thinker and the funder, or in this case, the inventor and the wealthy weapons dealer. Now, I am not saying make this Romeo and Juliet. In fact, I'm glad there really isn't a big focus on romance here because this story doesn't need it. I'm just saying I would have liked to have seen both of them clash more because of their differing perspectives on science and the production and selling of armament. I mean, this movie is almost 2 hours long. I think we could have cut back on some of the scenes during the Great Exhibition battle and maybe added a few more scenes of these two together, butting heads, but I don't know, maybe that would have distracted from all the father-son stuff going on, which almost makes me think that Scarlet should have been cut altogether. As for all the other characters, they're all pretty bland or generic or just plain forgettable. I mean, I've barely even talked about who Ray is and what defines him as a character, and that's mostly because there's not much to him. He's just a kid who likes machines and gets angry when you insult his family. The only memorable character for me was his father, Edward Steam, and that wasn't so much because of his character, although maybe it had a little bit to do with his design. It was mostly due to the dub. Edward is voiced by Alfred Molina, and in case you don't know who that is, he's Doc Ock.
Don't touch him normally, did you say?
Warmly.
Oh, warmly, sorry.
And he does a phenomenal job in this movie.
We are the ones who shall bring the power of science to all humanity like a shimmering gift of the gods.
Under the O'Hara trademark, naturally.
He's not the only high-profile name attached to this movie either. Patrick Stewart is here too, and he voices Dr. Lloyd.
When a man crosses the line into pure evil, then he's as good as dead.
And another one of the X-Men shows up as well, Anna Paquin, who voices the main character, Ray, and she's kind of the biggest flaw of this film.
Paid myself for the brass valve, I did. And I'll put it to good use as well.
She sounds very stiff and wooden because she's constantly straining her voice too much to sound the part, and it just doesn't work.
A Zeppelin came and plucked me right off the train. They got it.
It's a real shame that things turned out like this because the dub on the whole is pretty solid and fitting for the story and setting. But even if it doesn't sound amazing all of the time, the movie still looks like $1 million. Or should I say 26 million bucks, because that was the budget for this film, which is really big for a Japanese movie. And Otomo put that money to good use. Steamboy is very fun to look at. Most sequences, like the one towards the start with the Star Wars Episode 3 General Grievous wheel, do manage to blend 3D with 2D in a way that doesn't take you out of the moment, but truth be told, there is a little bit of that early 2000s CGI jank here and there. But does it measure up to Akira? I'm gonna go with no. Maybe in some areas on a technical level, but Steamboy is not as interesting or impactful as its predecessor. And I think Otomo knew that more than anyone, which is why this movie took 10 years to make.
When an idea first comes into your head, it is a wonderful thing, a wonderful feeling. It feels great to think you can make this. But once the actual process begins, my feelings, my emotions, this big hope that I thought I was going to create something great diminishes.
Things just weren't coming together like they were supposed to, and the expectations continued to rise with every year that got added to this film's production. If Otomo can make something like Akira in just 3 years with a budget of 10 million, then imagine what he'd be able to do if he had 10 years and a budget of 20 million. But I don't think the extra time or money did the film any favors. If anything, it may have caused Otomo to lose sight of his vision for this movie, which might be why no one saw this movie. When Akira came out, it was the 6th highest grossing film of that year. Steamboy was number 18 of just the domestic films. There was still some faint hope that Steamboy could possibly turn a profit in America, and if you look at the film, it seems tailor-made for an American audience, but any hope for that basically died when Sony decided to only give it a limited release stateside in a select number of theaters. Now, it's true that anime films never get the same treatment as a Disney movie, but this was post-Spirited Away. People knew about anime and they were willing to see it in theaters. That's why Spirited Away, despite only showing in less than 1,000 theaters, grossed a nice 10 million in the US. Steamboy didn't even make $500,000. And as much as I want to put all of the blame on Sony, I can't really do that because for whatever reason, the MPA gave Steamboy a PG-13 rating when this is clearly not a PG-13 movie. There is no foul language, no nudity, and no more violence than Star Wars. And there's not even anything as grotesque as anything from Akira. There's like one scene that has some blood, and maybe it's a little too much for a kid movie. But then you could really say the same thing about Spirited Away, and that one's still PG. Why, is it because they hit the Twin Tower Bridge? Some people have described Steamboy as nothing more than a glorified tech demo, and I wouldn't put it as bluntly as that, but I do see what they're seeing. Although oddly enough, Otomo claims he focused more on the story than anything else because he found it difficult to convey human emotions through animation. That second part surprises me, but that first part really confuses me because I wouldn't say that this movie has a good story. It's easy to follow, but it's not a strong narrative, and it takes a backseat to the animation more often than not. Like certain scenes only exist to show off something cool rather than move the story along. The last third of the movie is honestly a bit unnecessary. It's mostly just lever pulling, mechanical mumbo jumbo, and the explosions. Then you get to the credits and you see a whole sequel's worth of story play out in a slideshow. I don't think there's a single idea from Otomo, be that thematic or animation related, that got left on the cutting room floor, and that's part of the problem. Steamboy is a film that has too much to say and too much to do and too much time and money to make it obvious that this just isn't working. Otomo had initially envisioned Steamboy as a 3-part OVA instead of a feature-length film, and maybe it should have stayed that way. 20 years later, Otomo still hasn't made another film quite like Akira, but he is in the process of making his 3rd feature-length film, and he's going back to the future, so maybe, just maybe, this next one will be the next Akira. Or maybe Taika Waititi will give us the next Akira. I hope not, please stop him. Anyway, until next time, Ave Maria, Deus Vult, and a big thank you to all the cultured.